Hello, everybody, and welcome to RHAP's Amazing Race podcast for season 37, episode 7. And I am Jessica Leeson. You may notice if you're watching the video, nobody's wearing a costume because Mike Bloom is out having adventures this week, and I am here holding down the fort. And I've brought in, maybe I should have told her to put on a costume so that somebody would, because I'm not going to. But I have brought in some amazing talent to recap the Amazing Race. And when Mike and I were talking about him being gone and who I needed to get for the recap, I thought, who better than the person who has been there with us at our side at the last several last several Amazing Race finale and premiere parties. So I thought, yes, we love talking Amazing Race. We're going to bring her on. So I want to bring on to the podcast for the first time my lovely co-host, Maggie Morgan. Maggie, how are you doing?
I'm great, Jess. What a sweet intro. I, famously love The Amazing Race. Like, I love it so much. I discovered it during the pandemic after I started watching Survivor. In my opinion, Amazing Race, my enjoyment level far superior to my enjoyment level of Survivor. I am all in on the race. I've been making my way through every single season. Sometimes watching The Amazing Race feels like I pulled my brain out and put it in just like a beautiful warm bath. There's a little bit of excitement, but a lot of repetition, and there's like beautiful places that we're watching, and I get to watch these inner team dynamics that I just find so juicy and good. And I'm so glad we're back away from the private jet. We're back in the airports. This is a really great season. I'm really, really enjoying myself. And I'm so grateful that I get to be here to talk to you about this amazing episode that we got to watch.
Dare I say this is the best episode so far?
This is the best episode of the past couple of seasons, I would say. I mean, we got Phil going to the task to eliminate people. Like, that is, that's only you would know better than I would, but I feel like that's only happened, less than 10 times on Amazing Race, like the American version.
We've had a few seasons where he did it more often because they were on such a tight budget and such a tight schedule that was like, okay, last team, we don't need to, they're 30 minutes behind. Go get rid of them, Phil. And I think it has not happened in recent seasons, though. You are correct that it's been a minute since we've seen this happen.
And Jess, it's always the hay. The hay. Never ever pick the hay challenge. I know that these boys didn't have a choice. They got U-turned, which also what a thrilling U-turn. I was just aghast at the way all of that went down. It was amazing. But that hay challenge, I said to the person I was watching with, I was like, I would never do the hay. Doesn't matter how good I think my eyes are. Never am I touching hay if I have a choice on The Amazing Race.
Yeah, hay does not have a good reputation, to say the very least. It does not.
Oh, man. For me, it was, and not to jump to the end at the very top, but for me, it really was when we got that bird's eye view of how spread out the hay had gotten that I was like, oh, it's over. It's so beyond over. This is torturous.
Yeah, and I think it's fair, like, Nick and Mike all definitely knew their Amazing Race. They knew not to pick the hay. Yep. And then they were compelled to do it anyway. It was kind of out of their control. But I think it's so ironic, and I said this to them when I spoke to them for the exit interview. I think it's so ironic that last week they were kept in it because they made a train at the very last possible second, and this time they go out because they did not take one log.
Oh my gosh, that is such a hard, I really feel like this is the most classic Amazing Race. And I think maybe that's why we are both saying this is such a great episode, because you get the intrigue with the U-turn, you get the intrigue with the task, you get the intrigue with, it was so close, but then just right out of their grasp. And Nick and Mike have made amazing television. I mean, between last week and this week, nail biters all the way to the very end. They seem like great guys. I've loved what you said a couple of weeks back on the recap. It made me laugh out loud, and that's all that's been in my head since I've been watching the show, which is these are guys that on paper should absolutely dominate the race, but for whatever reason they show up to these tasks or they show up to the navigation and they just can't get it together. Like whatever can go wrong does go wrong for them. And I mean, this episode no exception.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing that I found out when I talked to them is like they thought the same thing. They thought, they're super fans, they're super fit, they're smart, they're personable. They practiced literally everything. They spent 7 years preparing to be on the show. And then in the first episode, they end up coming in 6th out of 7 on their what was the thing called? The fork in the road. Sorry. Yes, the fork in the road test.
When they broke them up.
Yeah, when they broke them up and they forked them, they kind of got a little forked and it got in their heads. And the rest of the race, they were just thinking about, we almost got eliminated on the first leg. And for some people, that would light a fire under them. But for Nick and Mike, it was like they were so sure they'd come in and they had all the tools to get first and they didn't. So I can see like they kind of gave them the yips.
Yeah. And that's sort of the thing, like on the Big Brother coverage that, before we started, obviously I'm such a Big Brother girl. And I was talking to Jess sort of about like my Big Brother knowledge and comparing it to her Amazing Race knowledge, the breadth of knowledge. But that's what is often happens with folks on Big Brother. These big super fans come in who are, they've studied the game, they know what they're going to do coming in, and the amount of pressure that brings with it, like you can't ease into it. And these games are already so high pressure. Any added pressure on it can just really mess with your abilities with trusting yourself, trusting your navigation skills, trusting all of the preparation that you've done. And that's such a shame to hear that really kind of messed them up for the rest of the race and gave them, like, spooked them a little bit, that they became skittish of their own skills.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's possible to over prepare. Like, I think from what you're saying, it's certainly possible to over prepare for Big Brother.
It is.
But it had never occurred to me that it might be possible to just like get so focused on the race that the first thing that happens that throws you for a loop just kind of puts you off your game.
Yeah, I mean, and I always say for Big Brother, but I think that this counts for all of these types of shows. Adaptability is the number one most important skill for anybody who's going to come on any of these shows, from the CBS world to Traders to any of these types of, like, an Amazing Race is much more straightforward. There's less social strategy within the Amazing Race, but still these task-based shows where you have to they're putting you in these crazy situations. The teams that are adaptable are the ones who come out on top 9 times out of 10. Even, look at somebody like Jonathan and Anna, where when things just don't go slightly different than the way Jonathan was envisioning, it's like he's crumbling, and Han and Holden too, at the top of the season, they really, I think, were getting anxious with their own ability. And once they settled into their groove and realized how adaptable they are and the skills that they do possess, they've really sort of eased into what their ability is. And you can see them excelling as they move forward in the race.
Yeah, I think Han and Holden are kind of the flip side of this coin. They got hit with adversity very early on, but they've figured out how to work around it and they've overcome it and learned from it. Which isn't to say that I don't think Nick and Mike learned anything. I think they just never were able to apply it because of outside circumstances.
Yeah.
And I think if one thing goes differently, we're looking at them going much further.
Definitely. One log goes differently. We're looking at them going much further.
Yep. So let's go up to the top of the leg and we'll talk about, this is another first country. Did you know anything about Bulgaria?
Well, yes, I've heard of Bulgaria, obviously.
That gives you a leg up on some of the races.
Yeah. Well, I've heard of Bulgaria, but I didn't even realize that it was the first time that we'd been to Bulgaria. What an exciting, I really loved I loved the 102-year-old woman who ate the yogurt. Like, I really thought the self-driving aspect of it made them actually really go into the countryside. And I thought that it was a really great set of tasks that they had to do. And what I really liked was, like you've been talking with Mike all about the tasks within getting the clues and stuff, like put this paper in water and like see it, read that. And I thought that they had two sort of really fun versions of that with the library and the apples. And yeah, I really, the countryside was so gorgeous where they were. Everything about, that where the hay and the log task were, I thought that it was just blue sky. It was so beautiful. And I loved that it was like really with the locals rather than this super urban populated area.
Yeah, it really was a commercial for Bulgarian tourism, which you don't hear a lot about, but I think, among those ex-Iron Curtain countries, I think there's still a lot of untapped potential as far as like places you can visit that are still very authentic and that are not full of gimmicky things. And I felt like we got a real picture of what it was like to live in the Bulgarian countryside. The thing I think I loved, like they have the task where they have to bring the apples to this altar and put the apples on the altar, and it's just in some random person's front yard.
Yes,
and I was like, that house looks beautiful.
I know.
Go live in that house.
I know. And, I also think, and we'll get to this later, well, like I have a lot to say about this part of it, but Jonathan and Anna, when they got stuck and the locals came out and just brought their tow and were trying to help them with sticks and things, I'm sure I just really, really loved that I felt as a viewer, I got an actual picture of what it's like to live there versus just visit.
Yeah, you really did get to meet people, and it's not even like the people that they came in and cast to run the task. It's just like whoever was there helping you out. So it was very authentic, I think, in that regard. So let's talk about the self-driving, because I understand that self-driving played a major role in how things shook out on this leg of the race, but I thought it was really weird the way they were talking about it like it was this sacred thing, the sacred element of the race, like, oh my god, we're gonna self-drive. I'm like, yeah, we've always done that, and we never talked about it like it was a tradition.
I think it's because it was the first time this season they were self-driving. I think because we're 7 episodes in and we haven't had a self-driving leg yet, which is wild. And so I think for them, there's probably so much anticipation up to this, where people like Alyssa and Josiah said, this is literally what we practiced. This was the main thing we practiced, was our navigation, was the self-driving aspect of it. So like, thank goodness we're finally here. And then people like Carson and Jack, who were like, we were dreading this. This is not our forte. But I think that the COVID seasons that we've been talking about, because those were also self-contained and self-driving. I remember when we were on the tar pit and Corey was with us. He was like, the main thing that I'm struggling with these seasons is that this is a specific skill set of the Amazing Race, that the people who are really good at self-driving, the people who are really good at navigation, the people who are really good at the tasks, these are the people who are excelling in this version of the race. But when you're looking at the race as a whole, like what the whole race is, when it's not a COVID season, this isn't always, this is 1 or 2 legs versus the whole race. So I thought about that a lot when I was watching the episode last night, because I was like, oh, we're back to, this is now just an element of the race versus the whole race, like something that it can make or break your entire season.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think it's something that we saw, when we see a lot of it and it's part of the fabric of whatever season you're in, it isn't worth commenting on. And there have been, and it's not just with self-driving, but there have been seasons where it's like, if you had that one skill that you brought in, it pretty much guaranteed you were going to go very far. I think last season is a great example of this, where you have a race that takes place almost entirely in Latin America, and the teams that are fluent in Spanish end up going a lot further. And it's one of those things, like, you can't plan for that. You can't really, it just has to work out that way. So teams that are very good at that self-navigating and self-driving on a season where they're not doing a lot of it, they don't get to show it off. So this leg was that opportunity for them.
Yeah, and I bet you we're gonna get one more self-driving leg on this season, and we're gonna get that confessional from Carson and Jack being like, "Last time it didn't go so well, so we're nervous," you know? I can see it now.
Yeah, well, we're still in Bulgaria next week. I think they're probably just going to keep the same cars.
Yeah, oh goodness, Carson and Jack, good luck. I'll be praying for you.
Yeah, well, here we are, a couple of New Yorkers. Do you have a car, Maggie? I don't have a car.
So I don't. I was actually thinking about this because I have been, when we were at the premiere party together, I had about half a beer and then was like, maybe I'll go on the Amazing Race, and texted my little brother and was like, let's go on the Amazing Race. And he was like, okay. Meanwhile, I do not have the athletic ability necessary to do the race. And also, my main issue is my motion sickness. I have really
Mm,
bad motion sickness. On a plane, I'll get sick. In a car, I'll get sick. And I was like, okay, so for a self-driving leg, I couldn't be in the back reading the map, not because of like my lack of navigational skills, just because I would get too sick. I was like, so I would have to be driving, but I can't drive stick. I'm a New Yorker. I would need to spend a month back at home in Michigan learning how to drive stick. I think literally last night I was going through all of this in my head, and I was like, oh, a very difficult hurdle for me in my Amazing Race journey.
yeah, I mean, the fact that I don't drive at all has
Uh,
pretty much disqualified me.
I didn't know you didn't drive at all.
Nope, never did. Moved to New York specifically so I wouldn't have to.
Yeah. Well, there really is no need when you're here. There
Yeah.
really isn't.
Well, I mean, what is the one thing that people always say they want to do with a car in New York? They want to go to Costco. That's like
Yeah.
every
Or
New Yorker.
IKEA.
Yeah, Costco or IKEA. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, but I will say, as a New Yorker, I feel very strongly that I am good with navigation. I don't think like I am somebody who's like naturally good with directions. I'm not. I'll get turned around, but I can read a map because of the city. Like it's really been a skill that I've honed since being there. So I was surprised that Carson and Jack were struggling so much with a map. But I guess if you're talking highways versus like city blocks, or like subway or like transit systems, as I'm talking this out with you, Jess, like they're so good on the other legs where they're using a lot of public transit.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would make sense to me.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I
Mhm.
think there's navigation while you're trying to drive a car, and
Mhm.
there's navigation while you're on foot or on a train. And I think like New Yorkers are uniquely equipped to get to any city and know their public transit system inside and out. Like that
Mhm.
doesn't bother them.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is something where you get going in the wrong direction on one road and
Yeah.
you're sunk. And we've seen this happen before,
Mhm.
which is why, you have Phil giving this like big alarm bells about this dangers of self-driving at the top. Honestly,
Mhm.
like if everybody had navigated it perfectly, I don't think we'd get that little stinger about the self-driving. I don't think
Yeah,
that
I
happens.
I think you're probably right. I think that they were teeing up a serve here for Carson and Jack to execute throughout the episode.
Yep, and they returned serve with aplomb.
In fact, they did.
Yeah, so this was the thing that was just like mind-boggling to me. Was I was sure the whole episode up until the last couple of minutes, like this is another strong team going out before their time. There's no suspense to this until the U-turn hits, and then I'm still like they're going and going and going, and we still don't see Carson and Jack. And it was absolutely wild to me that it was on track to be this kind of worrying-ish episode, and then
Mhm.
they U-turned it around into
Oh,
interesting again.
my jaw was on the floor. So what happens is Melinda and Erica get to the U-turn first. They know that Nick and Mike are behind them. They don't realize that Han and Holden are also still behind them. They think that it's literally a foot race between them and Nick and Mike. And I loved the confessional where Nick and Mike were like, we saw them go by and they were running. And we were like, oh no, we need to run. I thought that that was such a fun aspect to it because Melinda and Erica had the knowledge that there was a U-turn ahead. Nick and Mike didn't have the knowledge, but they could read the situation well enough to know we got to hustle. We got to move our butts. And so Melinda and Erica kind of freak out and put Nick and Mike on the U-turn board and then immediately go to pull out their clue. And they were like, there's 3 other clues in here. are you kidding me? So then they're like standing at the U-turn board, basically telling Nick and Mike, like, put up Han and Holden, like put up Han and Holden because there's other clues. Like, we're so sorry. We're so sorry. But still, nobody knew Carson and Jack hadn't been there. They didn't know who that last team was because you would never have thought that it was Carson and Jack based off of the rest of the race. It was such a thrilling, exciting sort of mess of a moment. I loved it.
Yeah, it was beautiful. It was so many things coming together. And yeah, this was something that I definitely made sure I asked Nick and Mike about, because you're sitting there thinking, like, there's that many people left, and I think they're not allowed to look at the clue box until they're
not
make the decision about the U-turn. And everybody would have assumed, based on previous performance, that Carson and Jack just, like, breezed over everybody and are way out in front. And they would never have guessed that that was the team that was that elusive seventh clue. And it was, and then you get Carson and Jack running up to the U-turn board like, we must have been U-turned. Somebody must have U-turned us. And they're not U-turned. Okay, this is why the U-turn needs to go after the detour. This is a correctly placed U-turn. And imagine this episode if they just like drop a U-turn at the beginning and people know they have to do two tasks. I hope this lights a fire under the Amazing Race producers to never do that again, because this was so much better. It was so much better.
Oh, like I said, this is like the best of Amazing Race, in my opinion. The mess at the U-turn board, and then Carson and Jack being so defeated and starting to yell at each other. I can't remember if it was Carson who yelled at first or Jack who yelled at first, but he was like, there's people here. Oh my God, there's people here. There's people here still doing it. And then when they get that caution U-turn ahead, and they hadn't even made the connection yet of like, oh my gosh, this is why they're still here. This is why they didn't trade. Like, and then you get the exciting moment of Carson and Jack realizing that they're not on the U-turn board. I felt like it was reveal after reveal after reveal, where we as the audience had all of the information, but we were watching the racers discover all of the information, which made it so exciting.
Yeah, it was fun, like, especially I think when they're walking up to that U-turn board and and you're sitting there like, I can't wait for you to see it. I can't wait for you to see it. I'm glad we still have them with us. And if they come from behind and win, that's going to be such a great arc. Like, they almost went out. It's better than I can't even think of a time. Like, now I feel like I am genuinely hoping they do win.
Oh, I've been rooting for them since about episode 2. I love Carson and Jack. And, I think that also the reason that I was just like smiling ear to ear when they got to the U-turn board and we're like, oh my God, it's not us, is that they are like such lovely friends to one another. Like, there's absolutely a world in which a team that gets lost for 3 hours is screaming at each other in the car, is pissed off, is blaming each other, like all of this kind of stuff. But they remained positive. Even Carson being like, I showed up so defeated. I was like, this is your defeated? Like, if this is your defeated, you are a vibe and a half, dude. Like, I think that also, like, the fact that they have been able to hold each other so well throughout the race has been a huge reason why I've been rooting for them so hard. I felt that way last season too with Ricky and Cesar. Like, they just were so sweet to one another. They were always rooting for each other, even when things got a little stressful. They really trusted their partner. They never made their partner feel bad for what was going on. And those are the dynamics that I just really love seeing on The Amazing Race. And those are the teams I always root for, no matter what.
Yeah, they're so lovely to one another the whole time they're out there. And I loved that this U-turn board managed to light so many fires under people and like get them going in so many different ways, because you had Carson and Jack's arrival, like, kind of galvanizing Nick and Mike to try to knock it out. Then you have Carson and Jack, like, realizing they're not out of it entirely. It's like, okay, that's where the U-turn board goes. I'm going to say it again. That's where it goes. It doesn't go at the beginning. It goes at the end. Like, it's so much better than the last time we saw a U-turn. I'm sorry. It's like, I don't even want to see it again unless it's there.
I mean, and also, like, I think that the thing that was so fun about the U-turn as well is that, like, Nick and Mike had to do the hey. I loved it. They were so close to each other. So you could see. So there was this like era of anxiety for
Mhm.
everybody about like, oh my gosh, are they done? Are they done? You know, like they're kind of able to see each other, but not fully, obviously, because Melinda and Erica didn't realize Han and Holden were also behind them. And yeah, I really like all of that. The back 40 minutes of the episode were just like my heart was racing the whole time, even though I knew we had all the information, and yet still my heart was racing.
Yeah, and it was such a focal point of the episode that I kept
Mhm.
forgetting which teams had not yet milked the sheep.
I know.
I feel this is such a classic Amazing Race segue, is like,
Uh-huh.
and then let's talk about milking the sheep in Bulgaria. This is like something that somebody that is making fun of Amazing Race podcasting would do. Like, I'm
Uh-huh.
doing it to myself. But let's talk about milking the sheep.
You know, I was into the milking of the sheep. I felt like it was just a classic Amazing Race task. If you're not milking something on one leg of the race, did you even race at all? You know,
Got to milk your
that's
own milk.
you got to milk your own milk. And they got out lucky that they, only that they got to eat that delicious yogurt, because I've seen people milk a camel and have to drink what they milked,
Ugh.
like that warm, sandy, dirty, musty camel milk that, but I thought that it was a fun task. I thought that the 102-year-old grandmother was just the sweetest. I loved that she was commenting the whole time. She was sharp as
Yeah.
a tack,
Oh, yeah.
talking to her, I assume her granddaughter, but probably not, just, the woman who was checking the milk. I loved that she was talking, like they would come back in with milk and she'd be like, oh, look at this one has a lot. I loved her commentary. I thought it was so fun. Yeah.
I say like the locals on the. I don't think we had a dud local in the entire bunch. Like, you
No.
had the guy judging the wood, and he's like, "I've got a present for you."
Yeah.
And you've got of course, you have the 102-year-old woman and her granddaughter, who's also
Mhm.
lovely. Then you have the guy at the hay challenge, who's like,
Yes.
he doesn't say a word, but he's like he's so over it by the end.
I
He's like,
know.
nobody told me I had to sit out here for 6 hours.
For more than 6. I think probably that was a 10-hour day for him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the sheep challenge though, I did notice none of them were there together.
Yeah,
They
that was
all
interesting.
Really interesting that none of them showed up there together.
You didn't have like two adjacent sheep where they're like racing each other.
Exactly. Or they're, but by the time they got there, everybody had sort of spread out. And, Melinda and Erica had gotten lost at that point on the race too for a little while. So they ended up further back than they expected. Or, excuse me, they were shocked that they weren't the last person to arrive because of how lost they had gotten, which I do think just shows how lost Carson and Jack got.
Yeah. Well, and there was a lot of navigation in terms of like every task was in a different village. Did you clock this?
Yes, that's why I said the apples to the library to the hay challenge.
Like
to
no
the sheep.
no two tasks except for the detour.
Mm-hmm.
They're all in like go to this other village. And one of them was like walk to the other village, which was wild, but every single one of them, like you really saw a lot of different little municipalities in this one little region of Bulgaria.
It was great. It was super great. I loved it.
Yeah, it was. I hope we go back there again. Like it's wild to me that they haven't been there before now, but
well, with the excitement that this leg brought, I don't see why they wouldn't,
Yeah, there's a lot you can still do there. And there are a lot of countries in that region that I think they could get back to. And there's a few more untapped ones that they have not yet been to. Like when I first started this, back when when my entire personality was The Amazing Race, which I think we all know I've kind of backed off from that. Like I don't try to figure out which identical twin is speaking at any given time.
And we love you for it, Jess. Come on.
I
feel like I've learned so much from you over the years.
I don't do things anymore like make a spreadsheet of the 192 UN recognized nation states and list off where they've been and where they haven't been and why I think they won't go to these countries. And I did that back 10 years ago. I had a list of like, they won't go here because it's politically unstable. They won't go
Mhm.
here because it's hard to get to. Like,
Mhm.
we're not going to Bhutan anytime soon because it's very hard to
Mhm.
get into. And, we're not going to go, obviously, we're not going to go to like the Central African Republic because it's a little unstable. And,
Mhm.
and there's a few on that list still hanging out there that they haven't been to.
I love it. Jess is making spreadsheets referring to the geopolitical
No, Jess
climate
was
of
making spreadsheets. And of course, the geopolitical climate can turn on a dime. So
That
there's some
yeah, I
places.
I would be
Yeah.
interested to see it now and see, what it was like 10 years ago when your spreadsheet was made, and if they've been there, actually, places that you're
Yeah.
like, "Of course they're not going there," that they've been there in the past couple of
There
years.
there were a couple I was very wrong about. Like
Mhm.
they've been to a couple that, like, I didn't think they were going to make it to Albania, and they did.
Mm.
And um a few others on my list I was very surprised to see them wind up in. But it's something I wish I had that kind of time again, because I
Mhm.
would make those spreadsheets. I'd redo it. We'd also redo a season ranking, which I know people have been asking for because our last season ranking was literally 10 seasons ago.
Hey, I would listen. I'm just saying, I would be number one listener of that season ranking podcast.
Well, we'll see how long the off season goes. Like,
Okay.
we have to dive back in.
I
I
don't know. I think that we might get an Amazing Race season in the fall. I'm hopeful.
Well, they just wrapped filming on season
Mhm.
38. I do not know, but I would guess, like, given the cast, and I don't think it's a spoiler now because I
Mhm.
think unless you've been living under a rock and you don't have social media,
Mhm.
but I don't think that describes people that are listening to this podcast. I think
Yeah.
it's not a secret that the next season is all teams consisting of a Big Brother alum and their loved
Mhm.
one,
Yes. One of
including
those
one
alums,
team.
yeah, one of the alums and their loved one who were sitting next to Jess and I at the premiere party as we speculated on which Big Brother teams would be there, and they said not a word.
No, I
I
said, well,
did
they must have
DM
called you, didn't they? And they're like, no, they never called us.
And I did DM them after the cast was announced, or not announced because it hasn't been announced. After the cast was leaked, I did DM those people and say, "You are lying liars who lie," but I'm thrilled. But yeah, I've never felt sillier, Jess. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I am a fool. A fool."
Yeah, they fooled even me. And
Yeah.
I was I was I was outraged on their behalf, but it turned out I did not need to be.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how it all plays out. I haven't seen any of the spoilers. I've been able to avoid them, so I'm trying to go in pure. I love my Amazing Race. I don't want anything spoiled. Um
Yeah, I don't know if I'm allowed to tease this, but Mike and I may have already done a little bit of content and put it in the vault for later.
Ooh, that is a lovely teaser. I can't wait to ask you more about this off pod and see if you'll give
Yes.
me more than just that little teaser.
I will I'll tell you whatever you want to know, but not
Great.
on the pod because it's all supposed to be very, it's a
It's a
surprise.
secret. Yeah, it's a secret.
Yeah.
I am really excited to get into talking about each of these teams because
Yes.
I haven't talked Amazing Race yet, and I've got thoughts, Jess. I've
Okay.
got
I
lots of
I
thoughts.
I was warned that you had thoughts. So,
I do.
yeah, let's jump right in. We're going to go in the first place. I don't have Mike's handy dandy little chart with the photos, but
Mhm.
we will assume that we're 7 episodes in. We know who these people are.
Mhm.
Um, we are pros. Of course, we know who these people are. We're going to talk about
Yes.
Alyssa and Josiah in first place, having an amazing time. Their first place finish since leg one. And I just love them. They're another team archetype that is, generally speaking, I'm always like, meh.
Mhm.
It's the quiet, steady married couple, but
Mhm.
they're great. Their positivity. I mean, every team this season has been very positive, but I love Josiah's golden retriever energy. I love his terrible
Yes.
dad jokes. It makes me so happy that they've found their groove.
Yes, and Josiah also is such an interesting person.
Yes.
Like Josiah is like you said on a podcast a couple of podcasts ago, like never like Josiah is the archetype where you see him and you're like, okay, I know who this guy is and what he's about. And like, no, you know nothing. He's so interesting. He's lived, it seems, a million lives. He's got all of these random skills that are absolutely pertinent to his childhood and his young adulthood. And I feel like every single episode we're learning more and more fascinating things about him. And he's just like such a sweet man. He's so sweet to Alyssa. I think that the thing that struck me about this leg for them was, they said specifically, we really prepared for this leg. Like, we were most nervous about this. So for us to be rewarded with a first place finish is just really, like, it makes it all the sweeter. And they're kind of my chalk pick to be in the final three. I think that, like, out of all of these teams that are left, I think you can kind of lock them in for one of those final three spots.
I mean, I'd love to see it, but it's amazing to me because I think there's a lot of teams this season that would be at the top of the rankings in any season, and there's way more than 3 of them. I think Alyssa and Josiah are definitely one of those teams. We'll put a pin in that because we're going to go to another one in our second place slot. This is another team that, looking at them on paper, you think they're final 3 material. We have Brett and Mark. And they started out a little cold, and they're warming up now too.
They did. I remember in those first couple of episodes being like, I don't know why this is happening to them. Like, they got, unfortunately, in the music challenge, they're dancers, but they got paired with Ernest, who is not rhythmic, of Ernest and Bridget in that task where they had to work with another team. Then their cab driver took them an hour in the wrong direction. And the thing that I think is so great about them as a team is they said specifically, after the first couple of legs, like, we just want to enjoy ourselves. Like, we've realized there's things that are just out of our control. The harder that we squeeze and, like, the harder we hold on, the worse it is for us. So we might as well just enjoy ourselves, try and remain calm, try and stay positive. And I think that that's been serving them really well. And they have great skills. They're incredibly strong. They're incredibly agile. They're musical. They really have what it takes to win the race. They're kind of the complete package.
Well, they have one small flaw, one small chink in their armor here, which I find hilarious. And that is, like, the trivia knowledge is not there. They do not know whether a kilogram is heavier or lighter than a pound.
Yeah.
They do not know whether you milk a male sheep or a female sheep. And yet they're able to pull an obscure Coachella reference out.
I think it's just, what is more important? Like, what are the things that they spend their time learning about and investigating?
Yeah.
I would love to ask them, when you eventually get to talk to them, Jess, I would love to know how much traveling they've done before the race. Because I feel like these things, like knowing how much a kilogram is, that's something that if you've been to a lot of countries outside of the US, you would have a greater knowledge of. Like, I don't know that I have that knowledge completely built in, but my friend who lived in Nice for a year definitely would have a broader knowledge of that. So I wonder if, those types of things, like, these guys are Vegas performers. And so it makes sense to me that they would go to Coachella in the desert and, leave Vegas and have a grand old time and know all of the choreo probably that Lady Gaga did on her Coachella set, but might not know about if it's a ewe or, like, what type of sheep is the one that you milk.
Yeah. And arguably, these are more useful life skills, especially like in the circles in which they travel. This is inarguably, it is a much more essential life skill than knowing all kinds of random stuff about every random place. And I can speak from experience when I say that knowing all kinds of random stuff about random places, really, that and $3 will get you a ride on the New York City subway, right?
Yep, exactly.
What is it? How far has it gotten me in life, honestly?
It's gotten you a podcast, Jess. Don't say that.
It's gotten me this domain.
Yeah,
for sure. All right, well, let's move on. Let's talk about, you teased this up front, Maggie. You have some capital T thoughts about Jonathan and Anna. And I'm ready. I'm here to receive them.
Okay. So I want to preface this by saying I love the way that you and Mike always phrase it when you are talking about any team, the past couple of seasons, we've had a couple of teams, that I think that it's super lovely the way that you phrase it, that, like, you are not talking about them in life. You don't know anything about them in life. You're talking about what you see on the television. Like I am not talking in broad strokes about Jonathan and Anna as a couple, as a married couple. I'm talking about them as a racing team. And what I'm seeing with my two eyes and hearing with my two ears and what's in my brain is that I feel like I was transported back to 2006 and I'm watching some of these old Amazing Race teams. And, I think actually the main thing that I want to say just to kind of start us off here is this episode. The thing that I picked up on the most and that I noticed is when things weren't going exactly the way Jonathan wanted them to go, when it was Anna's responsibility to hold something that they were doing. So Anna picked the hay task. The entire time they're doing the hay task, because Jonathan is not happy that people are passing them, Jonathan is like, you totally messed up. Like, you picked the wrong one. And I can't believe you picked the wrong one. He's honestly, in my opinion, bullying her, putting her down the whole time, saying she picked the wrong one. How could she have done this to them? All of this stuff. They find the bracelet. Anna finds the bracelet. Then Jonathan got them stuck in a ditch. And instead of Jonathan saying, oh my gosh, how could I have done this to our team? He says, oh, I just have the worst luck. My luck, this thing completely out of my control. It's luck. It has nothing to do with me or my skills. Whereas when something's going wrong and you are in charge of it, it's all your fault. It's completely your fault. But when something's going wrong for me, it's luck. It's this amorphous thing. And that, within this episode, really pissed me off. I was like, are you kidding me? We all have eyes. We all see you parked the car wrong. You got it stuck in the ditch. Anna is not yelling at you. She's having this like emotional moment where she's like, I just don't know what to do. There's never any blame coming from her. She's not saying, I don't know what to do. Jonathan screwed us over so bad. Like, what really bothers me is the seeming, and I want to say, based off of things that Jonathan and Anna have put out online, it does seem like this experience has allowed him to do a lot of self-reflection, which is amazing and really great. And I hope that he is learning and growing from this experience, because what I'm seeing on the screen is just like blatant, everything is your fault and nothing is ever my fault. And there's a complete lack of accountability on his part for anything going on their team. And he is so lucky that he has a partner like Anna, because without her, he would have been out. Like, he would have still been floating around on that surfboard back where they were in Dubai. He would have been floating on the surfboard with his head on the surfboard, saying that it's too hot for him. That is my rant for this episode. That's what I'm going to say.
These are all fair points, Maggie. I think we have gotten a lot of beats of Jonathan really not internalizing this, which weirdly enough, though, like Phil's description of Jonathan is that he has never seen a racer that is so hard on himself. And that's not what we get in the moment.
Yeah, I would beg to differ based off of what I saw with my eyes and heard with my ears on the screen. Like, I would say that, in fact, he was hard on Anna and their team, maybe. But and I think maybe what Phil is internalizing by saying that is he wants to win every single time. Anything, I was talking at the top of the episode how adaptability is so important on this show. And I think that what we're seeing is that Jonathan's adaptability skills are not the highest out of the rest of the cast members that he's surrounded by. And I think that her resilience is the reason, like, his resilience level is quite low. And he did acknowledge that in his final interview, and maybe even on the mat with Phil. Like, I need to be a bit more resilient because when things aren't going his way, he gets a little petulant, in my opinion, and pouts.
And he has trouble moving out of that mode.
Sure. Too, and I think that is part of what he's learning about himself as he explores.
That's a neurodivergent trait for sure.
Sure, definitely. But it's definitely not fair to his partner, who he is speaking really poorly to on the
Yes.
race. And, also, this is something this was the first episode for me that I was like, okay, all right. It was the soccer challenge. I was like, no, 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 this is not how it's going to go. Because my biggest Amazing Race pet peeve is when we get the talking heads of the two people, and it's literally like the starting line background. And someone's like, okay, I'm good at everything. I'm good at navigation. I'm good at this. I'm good at this. But I'm a really bad swimmer, or, whatever it is. And their partner's like, you are a bad swimmer. And then we get to a swimming challenge, and the person, like they said, are not a good swimmer. And their partner's like, how dare you be a bad swimmer? It's like, we've established that your partner has this weakness. If you didn't want a partner with this established weakness, maybe you should have picked a different partner. So that's always been my biggest Amazing Race pet peeve. And this is not just a Jonathan and Anna thing. Like, this is throughout the 37 seasons of the Amazing Race.
Throughout all time and space, an Amazing Race.
This is a trope, and it drives me nuts. As somebody who has very clear deficits, if I were to run the race, like, I would say to my partner, you're not allowed to yell at me when we get to this thing, or this thing. If I'm getting sick in the back seat, you're not allowed to yell at me about it. It's something that we all know is going on. You agreed to run this race with me. And, I think that this is just sort of the way that their race has gone. I'm happy that the locals helped them and it seemed to lift their spirits. But I was really, every single episode, I find myself pretty bothered by the way that he's speaking to his partner, and that is his wife. And whether or not they were married, whether like any partnership where one of the partners was speaking to them like this, I would be feeling the same way and pointing out, it's so interesting that you hold her to this standard, but you're holding yourself to a completely different standard. Like, her standard is like not even in the same room as your standard for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. And I also, when she tries to make the best of a situation, he isn't having it. And we had a difficult moment. I think maybe the worst moment for me, like the moment in which he did not come off very well for me at all, is she is milking the sheep.
Oh, I thought we were going back other episodes.
No, we're talking this episode. She's milking the sheep, and she's like, "This is great. I really love being out here. I love this sheep. This is so wonderful." And he's in the background, like, "Hey, could you do this a little faster?" And I'm like, "No. Non-roadblocker shuts his cake hole."
Period. Yes, completely. Those are my thoughts for now. Like I said, it does seem like this is a really amazing opportunity for them to grow as a couple, for him to reflect, for him to learn things about himself. I'm really happy that this has given them that opportunity. But I also think that it's like, it's a lesson for them watching it, but it's also in turn a lesson for everybody watching it about like what behavior should and should not be tolerated, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's really, I respect the hell out of the fact that he comes off of this experience and realizes he needs to reflect and change, and even the realization that he needed to get a professional diagnosis it's great. I think more men should be, like, more people, but more men in particular should be receptive to that kind of willingness to change yourself and to reflect on yourself. I think that shows that, that shows incredible character.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And also, like, not to just only focus on the negative about Jonathan, I really love, you can tell that he really loves the tasks that he gets to do. Like, he gets really excited about certain things. He is like, I think that we've been focusing a lot within the show on the negative and that behavior. But I also have noticed that he, when he had that Indiana Jones hat on, like, there are certain tasks that he loves, the music task, the music-based tasks. Like, he does get really excited about this and these experiences. I think that he just can get one-track minded. But yeah, those are my thoughts and my hot takes.
Well, thank you for bringing your thoughts and your hot takes. Like, this is a safe space for the hot takes for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think like I this kind of behavior, like how you interact with your partner, that's between you and your partner also.
Yeah.
Like how your partner responds to that, it could be a completely different thing. But I would say this is nowhere near as bad to me as people that do not respect the race. Like, you need to respect your partner, but you also need to respect the race. And I have seen a tremendous amount of respect for the places they're visiting and the tasks they're doing and the race they're running. And I think that to me is like, that's a team I can't root for, as a team that just disrespects everything they come in contact with. And
yes, I'm thinking of one team in particular, not on this season, many seasons ago,
yes,
who
many
was brought
seasons in the past.
back. Actually brought back specifically is the one that I'm thinking of. But yes, I know exactly what you mean. Especially there's great reverence for the locals and for the culture, and absolutely.
Yeah, and the race has leaned into this too. Like, I think the race understands where that line is that's going to take people so far out of their comfort zone that they're going to end up not having a good time. Like, they're making them eat a bowl of yogurt. They're not making them eat 10 pounds of yogurt.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on then to our fourth place team. Han and Holden had a pretty amazing week, all things considered. Like, how do you get U-turned and come in fourth place?
I know they did great. And, I think that we sort of talked about them, being in a bit of trouble at the start of the race. I felt like they were just frantic. Like, they were just so frantic. Even they said, like, we just freak out. We're freaking out. Like, we need to take a second, take a breath, trust that we know what we're doing. Like you said on that surfing task, like Han sort of like gained her confidence. And I've been loving them. I feel like they're in a really good place. I feel like the best place to be going into these final legs is to be like on an upswing. And I think also the thing that I've enjoyed about watching them is that I feel like I've watched their relationship grow. They said like we haven't spent much time together, and I feel like you can see that sort of in those first couple episodes. Like their puzzle pieces aren't really fitting together, and as it's gone on, the puzzle pieces have been fitting together so much better. For them to get through, look, I know I just went on like a huge rant about respecting your partner and being kind to your partner, but for them to get through that entire log challenge without one snap at each other as siblings, that's amazing. Like, that's a really, like, their communication is really, really great. And they were obviously with the hay task much more like they kept saying to each other, and I think it was like they were kind of manifesting, but also they were trying to pump each other up. Like, we have better attention to detail than them. We can do this. We have better attention to detail than them. We can do this. And they did.
Yeah, they really pulled out a victory. And I think there are some teams where, we were talking about it when we were talking at the top of the episode about Nick and Mike, is you have teams where they hit a snag and it throws them off their game. And you have teams that hit a snag and it lights a fire under them. And I think Han and Holden are definitely this type of team where they've figured out, okay, we don't want that to happen again. Let's make sure it doesn't.
Exactly.
Yeah. So then we got Melinda and Erica, who, for not the first time this season, ended up getting knocked further back in the pack because of their navigation skills.
I love Melinda and Erica.
I love them.
Fun team. What a fun experience for them. I'm really close with my mom, and we watch The Amazing Race together when I'm home. Like, cause like I said, I watch it, always. It's like the show that when I sit down in front of the TV, if there's not a new episode of something, I turn on Amazing Race. And so we've watched a lot of it together, and we just giggle about the fact that we would do horrible on The Amazing Race, but it would be so fun. And I feel like that's Melinda and Erica. Like, they have exceeded their own expectations every single week by the way that they have competed. And I think that they kind of, both of them were like, yes, of course we're going to try, but this is about us getting this experience more than it is needing to win. And I think that, we see that a lot in what they've accomplished. And I think that they're just so lovely. And the way that they've been able to really sort of position themselves with the roadblocks, where Melinda is doing less of the physical ones, like her doing the sheep this week. I was like, thank God she did the sheep, like thank God she did this one. This is perfect for her. But Erica does, I have to say, like in their team overall, and I think Melinda would totally agree with this, Erica chops a lot of the wood. Like she's doing a lot for the two of them. And I think that there's just something about that to me that is just so lovely, that she's like, yeah, me and my mom are doing this and I'm going to help her in whatever way I can. It reminds me a little bit of Danny and his mom from last season. How it's just like, come on, mom, we're going to, like, it doesn't matter if we win, like we're doing this together. This is like such a once in a lifetime thing for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love it when the child kind of has the opportunity to be the strong one for the parent. I think that's a really lovely dynamic too. And we've seen that over and over with the best parent-child teams. You have like, of course you have Danny and Angie, but even going further back to like Dave and Connor, you had the same kind of thing happening.
Yeah, Dave and Connor, what's her name? Mallory and her sweet dad.
Oh yeah, Gary and Mallory.
Blonde. Yeah, yeah. Like you get the sweet like child kind of picking up the slack of when, and then the parent, oh my gosh, even Mike White and his dad.
Yeah.
Mike White and his dad. And his
I was a fan of them.
Of course. How could you not be? His dad in the confessional being like, I'm worried I'm going to screw this up for Mike. Like, this is his dream. And Mike being like, my dream is to do this with my dad. Like, I don't, as far, the goal is to keep doing this. The goal has never been like, again,
to just keep doing this with my parent as long as possible.
Exactly. And it kind of goes back to like what I was saying about, what partner you pick. When you go on the race, what partner you pick. If you're angling to win, pick a partner that's good at everything, I guess. If you're angling to have an adventure with your loved one and try your hardest to win, and sometimes people do win and it's amazing, but like, I think that you see expectation there sort of in flux depending on different partnerships.
Yeah. And you can also like give birth to one and then hothouse him from birth to be an Amazing Race contestant. And then in 10 years, we'll see how that works out.
Well, we'll see. You'll bring the spreadsheet.
Yep, I'll bring the spreadsheet. I'm bringing the deep knowledge of the show. And then I'm just going to he's like a career tribute.
If you and George don't go on the Amazing Race, like what are they even doing? Like, what is Phil even doing?
I don't think Phil gets a vote, but honestly,
Phil, you got to vote. Come on.
I know Phil would be in our corner.
Yes, of course. I'm in your corner. I'm going to start the petition when George turns 18. How many more years do we got?
We got 10 years. So
okay, 10 years.
If Amazing Race is still on the air and the entire world is not reduced to smoldering crater, George and I will apply for the Amazing Race.
Amazing Race 55. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay. Now we got to talk about Carson and Jack. We've talked about them quite a bit in this episode, but I think it bears saying one more time, like, what a week for Carson and Jack.
It's amazing. Even Jack being like, I am floored in his last confessional. He was like, I have no idea. I have no idea how this happened. But I love them. I think, Carson is an actor. I have mutual friends with him. He's an actor. He's been on Broadway. Jack he went to college with one of my mutual friends. It was so funny. I was watching Survivor and then the Amazing Race came on and the guy who was sitting next to me was like, I know him. And I was like, wow, I have mutual friends with both of the members of the team. And that's probably why I'm like rooting for them so hard too. Yeah. But it was such a fun episode for them. It was nice. Also, like I said, even their version of down, they weren't huge bummers as somebody watching the show. Cause sometimes when people are so down, you're like, oh, this is such a bummer. But I'm so excited for them, and I hope next week bodes better than this one.
I think they were so strong in every leg up to this one that you have to imagine, especially if there's an equalization point. And who knows? Like, they're still in Bulgaria; they're not going to be traveling, so it's possible there won't be. But I would suspect that we're going to see them back out in front very soon.
Yeah.
Okay, and so then sadly, that of course brings us to the bottom of the batting order. Yeah. We have Nick and Mike, who we will miss greatly because they were such a fun team. They were if we're going to cast this type I want Nick and Mike types every time.
Completely agree. Completely agree. I want guys like, because they were also like, they were emotional too. They got emotional with each other, which was really fun. Like they would get fiery. They got like excite. Like I feel like a lot of times this sort of duo, these like, they're brothers, but you see like best friends or like in their age range, the like guy teams, they're a little more stoic or they're a little more like laid back and chill, but they got like fiery. They were really passionate, obviously, about the race. They're huge super fans. And I will really miss them. We've lost some really good teams the past couple of weeks. Pops and Jeff, Scott and Lori, like love Scott and Lori. I mean, love Scott and Lori. I was so blown away with their skills. I think that it was such a loss to lose them in that crappy double U-turn that didn't make any sense. I agree with you. You shouldn't be able to plan out your U-turn. Should have been more tasks on that leg. But it's a great cast overall. I've had so much fun watching them.
Yeah, they really knocked this cast out of the park. These have all
totally
been great teams. But yeah, I had the chance a little bit earlier today to speak to Nick and Mike, and that interview is going to be in your feeds alongside this podcast, so you can get all of the details from them. They were just lovely guys to talk to, big fans of the race, clearly went in there with the right attitude and came out of there feeling like they'd gotten a lot out of it. So, I mean, what else can you say about Nick and Mike? They were fantastic.
Lovely. I hope that they maybe get a second chance. If we ever do another second chance season, they would be somebody that I would be interested in seeing again.
Yeah, I mean, anything could happen. I'd like that better than like bringing back some team that's been on twice already.
Definitely.
All right, so Maggie, I think that brings us to the bottom of the episode. Is there anything else you wanted to shout out about the episode?
I feel like I have been talking nonstop for an hour. I feel like people are going to be like, I got on this podcast to listen to Mike and Jess, and then I exclusively heard this girl named Maggie talk. But I've been bottling it up all season. I've been so excited to talk about The Amazing Race. I love the show so much. This has been such a great season, and I'm just really enjoying myself.
I mean, better to come in hot than to have nothing to say. And I'm like, oh, Maggie, what did you think about this team? They were good.
Yeah,
they're fine.
Very true. Very true. The point of a podcast is to yap.
Yeah, that's why we brought you on. We wanted to hear all of your takes. Mike will be back with us next week, of course. But Maggie, what else are you up to lately?
Yeah, so right now, like we're in the the holding pattern of Big Brother. We're without a Big Brother Canada. I just talked with Kirsten McInnes on the Hot Dummies on Islands feed this past month about Temptation Island, which is on Netflix. So if you want to check that out, we had 3 really fun podcasts. We did a first episode was a crossover with Chappelle with Nothing But Netflix. And then Kirsten and I talked about the first half of the season and the second half of the season. So check that out if you're interested. Also, I'll be back for Big Brother when it comes back. I did the season 11 Big Brother retrospective. You can listen to that on the RHAP Big Brother feed. And I'm just, I'm around. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok at @MLMorgan_. You can find me on Blue Sky. I think just Emma Morgan without the underscore because I got in early enough.
Early adopter.
Yeah, I'm around. I'm having a great time. Please, if you have thoughts on The Amazing Race or this episode, hit me up. Let me know what you think. I love talking Amazing Race. I mean, I feel like poor Mike Bloom is getting random texts from me at all hours of the day and night about seasons from 2008, being like, wow, I can't believe these 2 teams, whatever. I'll never forget when I texted him and was like, I'm obsessed with the way the show is portraying these evil lesbians. You know who I'm talking about.
I know who you're talking about.
Evil lesbians. I that's all I have to say. But yeah, if anybody listening, we obviously have the RHAP Facebook group. I'm in there all the time chatting. So hit me up. I love talking Amazing Race. And thank you so much for having me, Jess. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's a genuine pleasure, Maggie. I love talking race, of course, because why else would I still be here after, a decade plus? Like there are people that were not born when this podcast launched that are now fully fledged human beings that can listen to the podcast and form opinions on it. So that's insane to me. You can find me on the social medias. I am over on Blue Sky at Jess Lease. So I'm trying to have a real name in some places, but I'm on Insta, and I'm trying out Threads now. I'm starting to get into Threads. But over on Insta and Threads, I'm at Haymaker Hattie, and you can hit me up there to talk Amazing Race or anything else that's on your mind in the reality TV and other spaces. Of course, Mike is on the social media everywhere at Mike Bloom Type, and you can find his coverage of Survivor, Amazing Race, and other things over on Parade.com. So next week, Mike is back, and we'll be talking about another amazing episode. And then I believe we've got another 4 weeks till the finale, and then 3 or 4. It's the 15th is the finale anyway. But we'll be here until the bitter end covering it all. Thanks everybody listening. Thanks everybody behind the scenes. And of course, we will see you next week.
This is RHAP. We know reality TV.